welcome to Horns of a Dilemma, the podcast of the Texas National Security Review. I'm Megan Opria, managing editor of the Texas National Security Review. In this episode of Horns, Frank Lavin, the CEO and founder of Export Now and former Undersecretary for International Trade at the U.S. Department of Commerce, discusses his latest book, Homefront to Battlefront, which looks at the history of World War II through the eyes of the soldiers who fought the war. This talk took place at the University of Texas at Austin and was hosted by the Clements Center. I hope you enjoy his talk and that you tune in for more episodes of Horns of a Dilemma.
I think this is my first time back in Austin in quite a few years, because what brought me to Austin, in a sense, was Bill Clements in the 1978 race. I wasn't working for then Deputy Secretary Clements, but I was working on the ticket for this very capable Houston attorney who was running for Attorney General, Jim Baker, that year. And Bill Clements got in by the skin of his teeth. I mean, by, something like 80,000 votes out. I mean, it was like 49 point something, and John Hill got 49 point something. I mean, it was a very close race, but he did it. He made it, and that's why this is not the John Hill Center, I suppose. So, so good for him, and it was good for Texas. And Jim Baker fell short, for which we can all be grateful for, because he went on to be Ronald Reagan's chief of staff and went on to be Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury and so forth. So it was all sort of worked out in the end, it seems. But we're here today not to talk about, I think, the 1980s, but more about the 1940s and sort of what happened to America in that journey in World War II. So join me for a bit. I'll set the stage and talk about sort of the big picture, then take you into a particular battle. Because the centerpiece of the story, the centerpiece of sort of 1944, 1945 is the Battle of the Bulge. But I want to set the stage for that. And the Battle of the Bulge begins December 16th, 1944. And the Americans and the Allies in general have a very good summer and fall of 1944, because D-Day is a success. And the Battle for France is a success. And it's a hard fought, it's very bloody, but it is a success. And the Allies are moving quickly to the German border. And indeed, if you get into the fall of 1944, you start to see stories in the press about Berlin by Christmas and so forth, because the advance is reasonably rapid. And it's a bit ambitious to say Berlin by Christmas, but if the subsequent few months are the same as the previous few months, the Allies will be in the heart of Germany in early in 45. So people are feeling pretty good about that. But embedded in that success is fragility, because Allied supply lines are stretched. The ports are all destroyed by Hitler. The rail lines are all destroyed. Allied bombing contributes to that. They're not reconstituted. So you're at the very end of a tether where it's very easy to be disrupted. Not that necessarily affects Hitler's plans, but he certainly takes advantage of that fact. And Hitler does have a plan. And his plan is to throw everything he's got into a final offensive on the West. That's what became known as the Battle of the Bulge. So there's three things I want you to take away from that, and then we'll go into the particular story of the book. The first is what I just alluded to, is just the audacity of it. This is a fellow who's been beaten back to the borders of his own country, and he's going to go on the offensive. And it is audacious, because he says, I'm going to smash through the Allied lines. I'm going to fight all the way to the coast. I'm going to split the West in two and paralyze the Allied offensive. Right? And he can spare 400,000 Wehrmacht soldiers. Right? Now, he's outmanned in general, but the attacker has the advantage of choosing location, choosing time, and so forth. So he can pick a spot on the American front which is lightly defended. Right? So the Americans are at the end of the tether, but he's got the advantage of home territory. So he's putting 400,000 Wehrmacht soldiers against 200,000 Americans. Hitler believes he's got 2 weeks of running room. 1 week before the Allies fully figure out what's going on, the scale of the attack, and 1 week before Washington and London and Eisenhower can coordinate the response. So he thinks he's got 2 weeks before they figure things out and can go against him. Second point is the scale. The Battle of the Bulge was and remains the largest battle ever fought by the U.S. military. It started with 200,000 GIs, as I said. At its peak, 1 million Americans in uniform in the Battle of the Bulge. At peak in World War II, in both Asia-Pacific theater and European theater, U.S. military had just over 8 million. So we've got 1/8 of everything deployed to the war in this one battle. The results are close to 100,000 casualties on the U.S. side. So you know of that million, that's a very bloody affair. 20,000 killed in action, 20,000 POWs, 40,000 plus other casualties. So it's a painful victory for the United States. Only 600,000 out of a million in direct combat, 400,000 in support. And the final point to take away is the brutality of it, because we're in the final phase of the war. Hitler knows it's the final phase of the war. The GIs know it's the final phase. And there are several incidents that sort of set a very ugly tone for this battle. But unfortunately, almost as soon as the fight breaks out, it deteriorates. The attack begins, as I mentioned, on December 16th. On December 17th, right in the first 24 hours of the assault, where the American side is still sort of coming to terms with this, there's a group of American forward artillery spotters are gathering for instructions and for deployment. And as you would gather as artillery spotter, you're very lightly armed. You're not supposed to engage the enemy in combat, but you're set ahead of the lines to call in artillery fire and to radio back results and positions and so forth, right? But if you're ever confronted by opposing forces, you're supposed to pull back, right? Because that's not your job, is to get in a firefight, right? So it requires stealth and discipline more than anything else. So they're congregated to be deployed, and they're captured, which is a bad start, but it becomes worse because they're captured by regular Wehrmacht soldiers, but the Gestapo shows up. It's in a Belgian town called Malmedy. 100 of them are machine gunned at the spot. It's known as the Malmedy Massacre. But the GIs know about this right away because a few in the back are able to flee into the woods and a few are able to hide in the snow. So the American lines know right away that the Germans are playing for keeps, and if you're caught, you're likely to be killed. So the stakes spike up immediately. There's another element of the brutality of this, which you see if you've watched any of the movies on the Battle of the Bulge, this phase of World War II. And the formal name of the German side was Operation Greif. But Operation Greif, it almost sounds like a Hollywood plot, but it took place. It's Hitler takes about 2,000 to 3,000 Wehrmacht soldiers who are fluent in English, and he outfits them in American uniforms and captured American gear and sends them to infiltrate U.S. lines. So you have enormous confusion and subterfuge and all sorts of bad news that these folks are spreading. They have limited success in their actual operation. They do a few things we can talk about, but they have enormous success in causing confusion. So that element of the war unfolds as well. So in the middle of this, I'll take you into the book, because the book is the story of the U.S. Army in that, and it's told through the journey of Carl Lavin, our father, what he did. So just to give you a little context, Carl's a high school senior in Ohio when Pearl Harbor's attacked. He's 17 years old. In 1942, he becomes 18 and he enlists. But he goes through various training commands and stateside assignments for 43, 40, most of 44. But he goes to Britain in 44. His assignment, final combat assignment, is he's a BAR man, a barman, Browning automatic rifle, which is each rifle squad has one barman, which is the automatic rifle as it applies. Everybody else has an M1. He's assigned the heavy gun. And he's assigned to a division which is in Southampton. But because of the assault, the breakout of the German attack on December 16th, Eisenhower, the very same day of the 16th, so Hitler says, I've got 2 weeks. Eisenhower detaches divisions from Patton and assigns them to Montgomery the same day. He says, I don't know exactly what's going on, but we've got a problem, and I'm moving divisions. But what they do is they start peeling away riflemen from that are in reserve in Britain and putting them into the front. The U.S. did something that no other military did in World War II, friend or foe. All other military units in the war reconstituted their unit by taking them off the line, reconstituting them, putting them back on the line. The United States didn't do that. The United States put in individual replacements, which was universally viewed as a disaster, but at the time it was the U.S. practice. And it's a disaster because you have no ability to know who you're fighting with or know their names or develop any kind of pattern of cooperation with these folks. You're just put in there. So Carl Lavin is taken off of out of Southampton, Christmas Day, 1945, 9 days to the Battle of the Bulge, goes across the Channel and is at the front. So Christmas lunch in Southampton, Christmas dinner on the Belgian front, on the northern tier of the Battle of the Bulge, and fights through the Battle of the Bulge, the Rhine, and the Battle of the Ruhr, the final 6 months, and then 6 months of occupation or so as well. So it's a challenging time for the U.S. military, in part because of the ferocity of the German assault, in part because there's limitations in what the U.S. can do with resupply. So for the first week he's in the field, they get replacements. They get replacements. The units maintain full strength. After the second week, there's no more replacements, and it's just a grind down. So within 30 days of combat, Carl's in the top half of seniority of his rifle company, because that's the number of casualties. In fact, when I was researching the book, then you go through the military archives and you say this rifle company reached something like 150% casualties. I thought that was some kind of an error, and I had to ask the archivist to explain that to me, and she said, no, it's not a math error. It means that somebody's in this rifle company gets killed, and the replacement gets killed, and their replacement gets killed, so you can easily get over 100% casualties for a unit in a relatively short amount of time. So that was the nature of the flow of combat. And what I'll do, if I may, Will, is maybe read a few excerpts from the book just to give you a flavor of some things that are going on. I'll start, if you don't mind, I'll start in Texas, because Carl goes through basic training at then Camp Hood, now Fort Hood. This is a note. A good part of the book is in the form of letters from Carl Lavin to his mom or his mom and dad. But as you get into combat, of course, these letters cease, or they're not historically that useful. So there's other sources as well. But this is just going through basic from a few miles up the road. This is 1943. Dear folks, here's what we did yesterday. Got up at 0500, 5 a.m. to you, which was not too unusual since we've been doing it every single day. Reveille at 5:15 to 5:25. Chow at 5:30 to about 5:50. Then try to get washed, make your bed, clean out your barracks, prepare for inspection, put on your leggings, fill your canteen. The water's no good here and has to be medicated. And police the area in about 45 minutes. Then we march off to the training area with pack and guns, either a 1917 model Enfield or Thompson submachine gun. From 0700 to 1100, we have classes of 50 minutes each, separated by 2-minute wind sprint and an 8-minute rest period. The classes are in first aid and gas, mostly, so far, but we'll be having many more different ones. We just started motor maintenance and driving, and we've also had military courtesy, the Articles of War. I can be put up for life for not shining my shoes, AW 94, conduct unbecoming a soldier, and map reading. Then there's an hour of drill and formation exercising. From 1200 to 1330, we eat and have a rest period, most of which is taken up in waiting in line to get some food, waiting in line to get seconds, and waiting in line to wash your mess gear. To 1730, we have some more classes sometimes. Usually the last hour is spent in doing something a little more exerting. Like yesterday, we had a hike. I believe I wrote before saying how hard it was marching 3 miles in 50 minutes with a pack in 85-degree heat. Well, yesterday we marched 5 miles in 45 minutes with a pack and a rifle in 90-degree heat. Those marches are really the only thing that I don't like about the Army, and I have a violent hatred of them. They are nothing but torture from the first step to the last, and there is no deeper discouragement than to have your leg muscles paining, your shoulders rub sore, and come to some rough or sandy ground and realize you still have 4 more miles to go, but can do absolutely nothing but continue to march and march at top speed. Then, toward the end, your eyes start to smart from the sweat washing through them, and you hope you won't stumble because you're sure you won't be able to start up again. But the funny thing is, once you're back and you put down your pack and gun, the relief takes all the tiredness away, and you don't throw yourself down on your bunk as you so ardently desired out on the hike. You lay down for 2 or 3 minutes, drink a quart and a half of water usually, and start joking about the hike. So that's a great Waco, great basic training story. I'm sure there are people here who went through basic and had similar experiences of walking around. So there's a sense of ebullience or a sense of pride that comes through very strongly in the early days of training, of doing your national part. and it's sort of a fun adventure in peacetime military. All right, but the mood, as you can imagine, turns darker when combat comes out. Let me take you into the field, if I may. So here's something from the front. So we're now in Belgium. Soldiers were required to inspect every room and every building in a town. You go through houses, office buildings, factories. You're looking for people, looking for ammunition, looking for weapons. Usually 2 or 3 guys go through a house together because you don't want to go in by yourself. It's always a little bit of a leery feeling when you open a door because if somebody wanted to shoot you, it was in a perfect position to do so. So if a door is locked, you kick it in, hit your boot right by the door handle. In one particular town, Carl and 2 others had just finished going through a house in the outskirts of town, and as they walked out the back door, they heard gunfire, and Carl saw 2 other GIs just about 10 yards away. They're taking aim at a group of German soldiers running across an open field into the woods, about a quarter of a mile away. Now, this is a perfect job for a barman because Carl can spray bullets and provide a very heavy rate of fire. Carl begins moving up to the line of fire to assist the 2 GIs, and he hears his sergeant's voice calling, "Lavin, Lavin." Carl recognizes the voice, and he looks around, but he doesn't see anybody. The sergeant wasn't there. He keeps looking. The voice is, up here, up here. Carl looks up higher, and in the house next to the one Carl had just finished inspecting, there was a window with horizontal and vertical bars and an arm sticking through it waving. Carl couldn't see through, but he figured out that was the sergeant calling him. "Come on up here. You get a good shot from here," sergeant said. Carl's hollering back, "Yeah, but the Germans are getting away." Carl says, I know, you get a perfect shot from up here. Get up here. Bring your bar. Get up here quickly." Carl immediately recognizes this to be a bad command because of the amount of time it would take him to run to the back of the house, find the hallway, locate the stairs, scramble up them. By the time he joined the sergeant, the Germans would be in the woods. And it would have taken a few seconds to assist the rifleman, but as a soldier, he's got to obey his sergeant. He gets to the back of the house with his bar. He gets upstairs. He gets in and sees his sergeant firing his rifle through a window, what turned out to be the bathroom window. Just as Carl steps in the door to the bathroom, Sergeant catches a bullet in his elbow and staggers back. He staggers halfway to the floor toward Carl. Carl's able to catch him and ease him to the floor, break the fall. Carl's now got to get Johnson out of the line of fire, so he drags him into the hallway in sort of a half-sitting position, get him out of Hand's way. You can look at Johnson's wounds, Sergeant Johnson. You see blood surging out of his elbow, and you know it hit an artery because you can count the pulse by looking at the blood spurts. Sergeant says, "Never mind me. Get those Jerry's." Get those Jerry's sounds like an odd command, but Carl's doing what he's told, and he crawls back into the bathroom, and bullets are streaming into the window. Carl's able to crawl below the base of the window, which is a few feet off the ground, and he's able to bob his head up and down to try to get a sense of the ceiling. He bobs his head up, and he sees 2 GIs shooting into the window. He bobs his head up once more for confirmation. He recognizes 2 guys. He bobs his head up one more time for confirmation, and he gets a million bee stings in his face. A bullet hits the crossbar in front of him, so his face is peppered with shards of metal and rust, but he's not personally injured beyond the shock of a bullet impacting a few inches from his face. But Carl's verified the shooters, and he's able to go back to Johnson. "Those are our guys. They aren't German. They thought you were Jerry." Johnson gives it a minute thought and says, "Well, get Smitty." Smitty is the squad medic. Smitty always said, "Never yell medic. Always yell Smitty, and I'll come as fast as you can." Everybody's out there yelling medic. I only want to help my squad. So Carl rushes downstairs to get Smitty, but he has to freeze at the front door. He doesn't want to be shot by his own men. So he takes off his helmet, he takes off his field pack, he drops his bar, he throws down his ammunition to make himself more recognizable, make himself light, and he bolts from the door, hoping that his squad recognizes him, and it works, be able to shoot, but everybody's yelling at him. They're saying, "Lavin, get down, there's Jerry in there, get down." Carl says, "That was Jerry, that's Johnson to me inside." They say, "Are you crazy? Johnson, you were shooting at?" "No, Johnson was shooting over your head. Now Johnson's hurt. Get Smitty. Johnson's hurt. Get Smitty." All the GIs start shouting for Smitty. Smitty decides the fastest way to get to the scene is to jump a fence, and unfortunately Smitty's foot catches a rail. He goes sailing with his medical equipment thrown loose. Through the air goes the morphine syrets, the sulfonamide, the gauze bandages, the compresses, the surgical tape, the tincture of methylate, the aspirin, the bismuth, the paregoric, the sodium amytal, and the tags for logging morphine injections. The GIs helped Smitty pick up his gear. Come on, Johnson's hurt. Stop fooling around. We have time for one more?
Oh, sure.
Sure. Then we maybe take some questions. Let me get into one other. This is after the Battle Bulge. This is April. So the war is essentially over. German resistance has collapsed, but there are pockets of resistance, right? And you never know. I mean, if people are able to surrender, if they're reasonably thoughtful about it, they're saying it's over. But if they're not able to, or they're not thoughtful about it, they're fighting. And there's this Carl's in the 84th Division, and the largest city the 84th Division liberates is Hanover. So it's a sizable city. But there's this terrible story about when the Wehrmacht knows they can no longer defend Hanover, and they say we're pulling out, but we're going to turn the sort of city guard over to the Hitler Youth and Nazi Party leadership. Well, we pull out. And so, as you might expect, as soon as the Wehrmacht leaves, white flags start appearing. And when the people say, it's sort of over, but the Hitler Youth go to these homes and shoot people. So you can't surrender. You're considered a traitor. So you're sort of trapped in this machine, and it's a tough time. So you don't know what you're going to encounter even the final weeks. So it's mid-April. Most of the fight's gone out of Germany, but there's still lethality there. What everybody knows is what's required is caution and steady progress. No time for heroics. The company's still not at full strength, even several months after the Battle of the Bulge. They haven't replenished. The captain of the company calls a meeting to inform the company that he has volunteered them for a mission. The men are to take the village of Gartow from resisting German soldiers who had successfully repelled a different company the previous day. And the captain proudly tells the GIs that there had been a regimental meeting at which the colonel had asked for volunteers. "I'm so proud of you," the captain said. Carl recalls that all of the GIs were unhappy with this decision. And his statement is, "You sorry son of a gun, you're seeking glory with our guts." So there's no enthusiasm for what's about to unfold. But the orders come through, and the village has to be taken. So the next morning, the company sent out. This village is about a mile away from their current position. The idea is that a rapid frontal assault without artillery support will allow the infantry to surprise the village defenders. And so the company does make a stealthy running attack across some level fields. There's a barbed wire fence out on the village perimeter supported by vertical poles, and the men congregate at the fence and use the poles to sort of hop over. But as the company approaches the fence, all hell breaks loose, because the Germans have been watching this advance all along, and they had previously ranged all of their weapons to the fence. So all of their mortar fire, all their automatic fire, all their rifle fires at the fence. So it's a very bloody moment. So you've got a lot of people being shot down, a lot of dangers. Carl hits the ground. Unfortunately, his bar's on the other side of the fence because he just put it over to prop. So he's pancaked until the velocity of the fight drifts to one side. He's able to hop the fence, grab his rifle, and he's able to move to where he sees some GIs congregating sort of on the side. You hit the ground, you run, you hit the ground, you run. But soon enough, you make it into it. It's a drainage ditch. So he's half deep in April icy water, but he's got some protection. He's with a few other GIs. The drainage ditch goes into town. So he's able to follow the drainage ditch with a few other GIs into the town. Here the discussion shifts. Interestingly, just to give you a little background of the story, most of this is done through, as I said, the letters form a lot of this, and conventional history form a lot of this, and then there's archival and formal military history, a lot of this. But there's about a half dozen repositories of oral histories in the United States of interviews with vets. And so you write to them all and say, do you know anybody from the 84th Division? Do you have any material or person interviews that I can read or study? And one place at University of Florida, Oral History Project, said, yeah, we've got an interview with your father. So, and unbeknownst to me, that he'd participated in Oral History Project some 20 years before, so we could take this. So I'm filling you in because this shifts to the first person. that Carl gets into the town. There's a sergeant there, and he points to a barn and says, see if you can get in this barn and up on the upper loft, upper level, and get a firing position. And Carl's able to shoot off the padlock and get in and get to it, kind of an office setting or level setting on the second floor, upper level of the barn. And here we shift to the first person. I was at the second store window. I saw a German trying to run across an open field, running in the direction of where the main action was. Well, I took a quick shot at him while he was running to try to slow him down. Well, it works because he hits the ground on a plain open field. Well, I thought that was pretty dumb, that he just lies there and doesn't move. Then I had to try and decide what to do. Well, he's mine. I could have him if I wanted. I didn't want to kill him. Do I really want to take a human life just having shot at him? He's just lying there? Well, I decided this is a hell of a time to start to become a conscientious objector. Decided, yeah, I would kill him. I didn't have to wonder what it felt like to kill anyone, so I just shot him. He never moved. I've had a queasy experience about it ever since. We had a patrol going out the next day. We went right by the guy killed. He never moved a muscle, head down. I picked up his head and felt the brains and gore. Well, what that meant, the position of the head, the position of the body, was that my first quick shot, where I just tried to slow him down, it actually hit him in the head. Had to be the first shot because he never moved when he hit the ground. So all the time, I was trying to decide, should I take his life or shouldn't I? In fact, I'd already taken his life. That struck with me very strongly ever since. Well, that was Carl's final moment in combat. There's a lot of other interesting stories about occupation and discussions with Nazis and discussions with communists. But his final comment of this combat is stupid Germans for not surrendering and stupid captain for ordering the assault. So that brings to close the combat portion of the book. But I think we'll be very happy to take questions. And thank you for being a good audience or listening to the stories.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Horns of a Dilemma. If you liked what you heard today, you can subscribe on iTunes. And don't forget to check out the Texas National Security Review at tnsr.org.